Hi, everybody. I am Conrad Agramont. I'm the CEO here at Agile IT. Thank you for taking the time today to spend some time with us going through what I feel is a very important topic, something that is often overlooked and pushed aside sometimes, but something that's very important either no matter what stage in your life that you are in preparing to go to Office 365 or you're on Office 365 or you've been using it for quite some time. It's always good to kind of get a fresh look at what you want to do for your environment as it relates to securing it and protecting it. So a very important topic. Now, I decided for this session to, I don't know, try and be a little creative, if you will, in terms of how we lay out what we're going to talk about today. But in the end, what I really want to do is kind of guide you through a story and really a set of chapters, if you will, that kind of lays out an approach of how you got here in terms of going to Office 365, what have you done since you've been there, and where you should be going, and hopefully give you some practical things that you can start with today to actually start evaluating where you are from a security standpoint today, and starting to look at what's the next thing for me, and how do I structure it for myself kind of moving forward. So really the big thing around telling the story, both in this session that I hope to do a good job for you guys and deliver through today, but also for yourselves. So as you go and you talk to your organization, or you talk to your staff, or you talk to your boss, both in planning or in budgeting, that you can tell the same type of story of level of importance, how you got here, what you need to do next, and even probably one of the most important things is continuously doing the process around security. Security definitely is not something that you do one time. It's not a one-time event. It isn't even a series of one-time events, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. Really, it's an entire focus, an entire process, and if you really, really want to do it right, it is an organizational focus for your business. So really, and the other, just to take a step back for a second, it's, again, focusing on those scenarios, not just what features, what came in my license, but what are the user scenarios, what are the business scenarios that we have, how you can lay that out, and then start figuring out what are the right attributes or ornaments that we want to put on that scenario to really provide the right level of security and or compliance as it's required for your particular part of the business. And I should note that if you have any questions, here in our webinar format, please just put it down there. We have Dan Kemenstruck, who's our manager in engineering, who's going to help answer some of those questions. And if you want to save some towards the end, we'll try and do our best to review what we can at the end. If not, we'll get back to you in email. Okay, so a little bit about us at Agile IT. So some of you may be customers, some just decided to participate in the webinar, so it's important to know who we are. We're based in San Diego. So while it's a little chilly outside, it's still sunny, ironically. Well, maybe not ironically, but actually. We've been focused on cloud as a business from our very beginning. It's over 10 years that we've been focused on the cloud, and a lot of work of that has been in Office 365. So we've helped over 1,000 organizations successfully deploy and get onto Office 365. So it's through those deployments that we've done with our customers, and even some of those we have long-term relationships with. Some we go back either for repeat projects that we do, or we just go back to ask and find out. We like to go back and understand from customers what they're going through. And it was through all of that type of research and relationships with our customers that really got us to where we are today in terms of this particular webinar and the services that we now provide to really kind of help people make sure that they're making the most of what they've invested in, and also protect the items that they've invested in their business as well. So really our vision at Agile IT, one of the core ones that we have is we really want to build a community of managed customers. Now we talk about managed customers, it's in lots of different scales. Some customers we do everything for, some customers we just do focus things for. It could be just security, it could be just backups, just depends. But our goal is that we do everything that's in the cloud or SaaS space. So very different from other partners. We're focused on-prem. We really care about customers who are committed to somehow putting on their roadmap what they're going to do in the cloud. Cloud isn't a strategy so much as an implementation, but we believe in the offers that it has. And as well as thinking about, well, what do those cloud services mean to other parts of the business? It's not just about IT and the IT department. It's about impacting the other parts of the business. And in this particular topic, as it relates to security, we have to make sure that other parts of the business that need access to their services have it, but do it in a managed, defined, policy-driven way that keeps our content and our users and our devices secure. So it's not an either or. We have to do an and. be productive, and be secure. So that's kind of our vision as a company. Now, chapter 1, what's your story? So focusing less about Agile IT and focus on yourselves. I think it's important before we really talk about the security perspective, you know, there's some clear parallels with other decisions you've already made, or clear parallels to other paths you've already taken. So take, for example, your data center. Now, the top left is what, okay, maybe you were awesome and you never had your environment look like this, but you've seen one. You've seen them in a closet, in a supply a garage in the back of your business. You've seen it someplace where it didn't start this way, but it ended up looking this way. In this environment, everything was at your office. You know, you had to manage every single thing, and you had to know it all, but you didn't. And so you took steps. You grew as a company. You understood that, you know, the closet with multiple air conditioners and burning up during the summer, and how do you get rid of the water and power going down, that this was no, you know, this was no place to put your serious part of your business. So you moved somewhere else. Either you rented a cage someplace, or somebody else rented a cage for you and you paid that vendor. You went to a colo environment or to a shared data center you know, of some sort. And so you've seen this environment somehow. And here, you know, some things were elsewhere. You still have a lot of things on-prem, but you have some of your more important, like email servers and database servers, somewhere else. You know, and you had to know some things because you may have still managed those servers, but you didn't have to worry about internet and, you know, cooling and you know, security practice, whatnot, for physical security, that is. So you started to split that up. Now, because you've made that decision of going to Office 365, you're now using you know, you're leveraging economies of scale, leveraging the fact that somebody's running a full facility, you're just using the service. You do not even know what Microsoft's patch management schedule is. You don't know how they run it. They do have those processes, so I'll talk about that later on, but it's somewhere else. So you've already gone through that cycle in terms of your kind of core infrastructure. I mean, you know, in many organizations, the email communication between the CEO and the CFO and their partners and bankers are some of the most privileged private information, and you already have that in the cloud. So, you know, this is really driving that large transition. The reason I say this is that security follows along that same path where, you know, there's a lot of things you used to have to do. You used to have to put in specialized firewalls and specialized scanners in your infrastructure to manage all these things. Now there's someplace else. The good news is that even when you did all that, you knew you couldn't do enough because the cost to do it, the training, the staff to do that, you just couldn't do even more things that you want. So the nice thing is that once you make that commitment into Office 365 and put things into the cloud, that there's all these other areas around securing devices and securing the content, protecting documents and information. You can get to those things now because those services are there now. These servers and capabilities have been around for years, decades, but they were hard to manage, hard to deploy, expensive to go through. And if you were a 50-person company, 250-person company, 3,000-person company, sometimes that was still too challenging to do. So what this means is that as an organization, you have this technical debt. Now, you may have done this because before going to Office 365, you said, yeah, you know, we have these old servers, or we don't have the technical expertise. And you hear this all the time. So the funny little graphic in the corner there around, you know, these two guys, you know, they're trying to push and pull a cart full of rocks. And, you know, the guy behind them was like, hey, use these wheels, you know, you got to stop and I got to put them on, but you'll roll faster. No, we have no time for this. It's taking us forever to just move what we have now. You could apply that same reasoning to lots of things, especially around security. Like, hey, we're fighting fires. People are losing information. I can't stop to deploy the things that would prevent any of this from happening because I'm fighting what I have. So you have all this technical debt, both on the security side, email services. So hopefully you see some of the parallels that you see there. There's also other business drivers. You know, business, you know, decided that, hey, email and SharePoint aren't, you know, the competitive advantage for us. You know, I have a great email server. It doesn't make us more money. You know, it doesn't do that. But they'll say one of the reasons I may have maintained it all this time because I wasn't sure. Well, the market has moved. You guys have already made the decision. We're going Office 365. So again, now that you don't have that burden, there's other things to go do, and productivity reasons as well in terms of why people make the switch into the cloud. But now we're getting to the part of, okay, these are the reasons why you decided to move your servers. These are the reasons why you decided to push your infrastructure management, not to some other IT vendor, but to the service provider, in this case being Microsoft being the service provider. And you put a lot of work into it, migrating content, changing security things, getting rid of public folders and going to SharePoint, moving content from file servers into SharePoint and OneDrive and maybe Azure Storage. You've done a lot of stuff. Man, there's a lot of exhaustion in doing that. And then even once you have that, there's about adoption. We have to have our IT people trained up. We have to get our end users. So there's even more reasons to kind of take a break from taking on more things. But the place where I caution you in not doing the right things for security is that malicious people, whether they're an outside force like a hacker or from whatever country they're at, to an employee who either maliciously or not maliciously gets caught into something where your information gets taken out, or any other reason, nobody is waiting for you to get to it. It's just happening all the time. So if you wait to get to those security areas, if you wait to learn it or to deploy it, you just have this hole that's getting bigger, and it's just only a matter of time. So that's why we talk about it with all of our customers. Like, why are you waiting 6 months to a year after you're on Office 365? You're totally exposed. You had that same exposure on-prem, I might add. Even when you were managing yourself, you had the same level of exposure. But again, the cost to do it was too great for a number of reasons. But now you're shifting that around. So this is where Chapter 2, we look at roadmaps. So again, when we look at this view is actually a very good representation of not just some of the key services that Microsoft has with Office 365 and some of the additional security capabilities and voice and analytics. This is a very good view, again, high level of the capabilities you can have there. Most people are just in the first two areas, but this also begins to appear like a timeline. Well, let me migrate first, then let me get productive, then I'll get to the next areas. 1 year later, man, Microsoft is coming out with new features, and they're changing Teams and Skype, and we want to get ready on that, and we're still learning how to use this. We're getting new laptops, and we're going to Windows 10. All these things are happening. So you may be in your migration here, you may be further along in your productivity, but a lot of people kind of stop here, or they skip over the security areas. Hopefully you're seeing the common theme of what I'm saying, and don't do that. Really what you want to look at is putting these things kind of in parallel, right? Because it just depends the scope of it and timeline. Some things never end. But migrations, unless you're acquiring new businesses or merging or something like that, kind of it's a one-time big event. Very expensive, it's costly, but you're kind of shifting your costs around. But now you're there and you're trying to be productive. You have to be secure from the start. Now, if you're an organization that says, hey, you know what? If all of my information got taken, it's not a big deal. I can restore it, so maybe that's not a problem. But if people get copies of these things, it's not a problem. Haven't found one customer that said that. But they feel through obfuscation, hey, I'm too small, who cares about me? Well, somebody would have to know the address. Maybe that's not a big problem. But it happens all the time. And so when you get hit with it, you start to ask yourself, was saving $600 a month or $1,000 worth, the impact to my business, where some businesses can't handle that. So it's I'm not saying it's the insurance game, but it's close. So really, when you think about your projects, you think about your roadmap, it isn't a one thing at a time. It is looking at all of the important aspects and then prioritizing accordingly and moving down methodically, because you are going to, your business is hopefully going to continue to evolve and grow. So will the productivity services, so will the security services, so will analytics and voice. All these things will evolve, but you have to start with security in mind from the very beginning. So when thinking about this, one thing that can be highly overlooked is what's called good hygiene. So when we're thinking about ourselves personally, good hygiene to just about everybody here, it's about, things that we tell our kids, things that our parents told us, brush your teeth, take a shower, make sure we go to the doctor, make sure we get our shots, make sure we're taking the medications that we need to do, flu shots, all these things as part of our daily habit, our weekly upkeep, our annual upkeep, quarterly upkeep, going to the dentist, right? This schedule and routine and ensuring that it happens. Make sure that every time you leave the dentist's office, I tell my own, so being a little person, I tell my own kids, if you don't like drills at the dentist, brush your teeth twice a day and floss. It's the only way to prevent it. And they buy into it, and it's great. No cavities, because they brush it. Like, if you don't like it, do this. If you don't like getting hacked, and if you don't like your data getting lost and you can't get it back, then you have to do good hygiene. And that is some of the most simplest things. And some of these things are, you don't have to think nearly as much when you're, hosting the cloud, because you're not doing this for your servers anymore. You still have to do them on your workstations. But even though Office 365 is running your data, you still may want to back it up and restore it separately. We do this for our customers as well, just so that we can restore it back in case Microsoft has a problem, right? So, you have to look at all of these areas. But a part of good hygiene also starts to shift around different from just doing your antivirus and patch management and monitoring on your infrastructure. But there's good hygiene that I need to have on my Office 365 services as well, things that I need to make sure I constantly check and constantly do, and I'm going to talk about that here in a moment. So good hygiene. I was talking with, we have a relationship with Gartner, so we're partners together, and one of them used this term good hygiene. I said, hey, you mind if I steal this, because I love it so much. And once I got that sealed in my head, I hope that you guys do too. It just makes me thinking about it a little bit different. Are we doing good hygiene for our infrastructure everywhere? Workstations, phones, routers, are we doing the basics? Is all the firmware up to date? Patches up to date? Have we looked at the logging? Or are we doing the right things? That's basic things that are so fundamental to where if something became a problem and we got that cavity, we knew exactly where we were irresponsible. So again, security is really, really big, but there's some core basics that we want to focus on, and that's what we call good hygiene. Okay, chapter 3. So let's talk a little bit about the Office 365, kind of the Microsoft components, as you will. We're going to start, kind of easy and talk about some of the main portals, and then talk about some of the other features. But let me tell you, within a short amount of time, I didn't want to do 45 minutes of just straight product demo. Here's every single product and here's every feature. Kind of goes against what I'm talking about. But it is important to understand what are the tools that Microsoft provides you to help guide you along through the process of evaluating where you are from a security perspective, evaluating and supporting you from a compliance perspective, and giving you the right tools in order to make decisions what you need to do. Again, there's a lot to do, but it never stops. That's the function that we play in these days, is to understand our business, understand the capabilities, and apply them correctly so that we can support our productivity and support our security rules. So the first place is the Security Compliance Portal. So here's the URL, protection.office.com. I love how they make it so simple now. It's a really great portal. So really your starting point to get access to many of the things that we're talking about. So even though sometimes you go in here and you click on something, it takes you to a different site, the Microsoft site. Takes you maybe, they're doing a good job of making the look and feel of all this really integrated together, or just look the same or behave the same. So, but there's still some places you'll go that looks a little different, behave a little bit different, like with Intune, the admin portal there still looks a little different than what you see with the other admin portals, but they're getting closer. So the one thing I'll say is that Microsoft's done a great job, a really exceptional job at bringing these things together and kind of rallying behind the message of simplicity, integrated, one single place to do all this. So I would recommend that you at least open up your browser to protection.office.com, but don't leave the webinar. Just put it inside background, that way you can take a look at it later. Log in with your tenant credentials, so if you have them. So you do have to have Office 365 access to this. I think you may have to have global admin access, I don't recall, but this is the place to go and start digging into it. Second place, and you may have seen it on the previous portal, there's like a little widget on the dashboard, and you click on it and goes here. Now this is a sample portal that I have, and it is very naughty, right? If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, this is an example of how the scores kind of go up and down. But if you look at just this particular one, I really done nothing with it. So it's I have 26 out of 364. If this was a credit score, you know, I wouldn't even get a departmental card for 50 bucks. It's pretty bad. Now, one question you may ask is, why would Microsoft or any vendor put me in an insecure state? Well, really the point is there's two things that are happening. One is there's decisions you need to make. If Microsoft applies what it thinks is the right business practice and then it's not following your own, then you would ask the other question, why is Microsoft enforcing us to do this? So things like retention policies, you have to decide, hey, if I reach a retention policy, I want to hold things for 7 years. After that, I want to delete it. Or hold it for 7 years, and when something hits that mark, send a notification of what needs to be removed. And I could say, and I want that retention policy only for email. Documents I don't care about. Or I want to create a policy where I retain all emails, all SharePoint content for 7 years, but everything else I want deleted after 30 days. I don't know why that would be great, but you can do it. So, again, tied to your business. So that's something where the IT person has to work with the legal team and go, what is our policy? Because we can do this now. So what is our policy going to be? And they might say, I don't know. Well, we have to look at, why would we get rid of things? Well, because the longer we hold them, it can be viewed as a, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be viewed, against you, for legal action. There's no reason to hold on to it. So, so we may want to do something different in that policy. So again, now the IT person is walking around to legal. They have to talk to the business departments. They have to work with the executives to define the policy. That's empowering because now it means we can really, oh, liability is the word. It's a liability if we hold on to it. So, now you're being more strategic in alignment with the business and probably learn about other things that you need to do as well. And then you apply that in Office 365, and then you continue to evaluate it. So this is that's just a small example of why Microsoft would not apply that for you, and it's one of the steps that you would need to go do. Enable and forward. So one that was in here was enable client rules forwarding block. So let's say on somebody's Office 365 on their desktop, they say, hey, whenever I get mail in for this, for, I don't know, contracts, send it out to my Google account. Scary stuff, right? So in that particular example, you may say, hey, I don't want people to do that. I want to turn that off. Or other organizations might say, well, this is the reason why we might still need it. So they've made a business decision to apply or not apply it. So again, there's all these different things that are in here, many, many steps. The nice thing that they put in here, though, is that you can mark some of those activities that impact your score and say, I want to ignore it, doesn't apply to us, and write a little reason. You can also write in there that this has been validated or handled by a third party. I think it's been handled by a third party. So maybe it's an archiving thing for compliance, and you decide, no, we do that through a third party before it even gets to Office 365. So we're covered. So you can put that in there as well. Now, you could say, well, if I do that, can I just do for everybody and give myself a great score and not mean it? Sure. Doesn't help you any in doing that for your business. But as Microsoft rolls out new capabilities or they find new vulnerabilities, they actually add to this. So it was like in the 200s about a year ago. Now it's at 364. So as they find new things that need your decision making or need an activity from you, they continue to add to the score. So you might do whatever you need to today at 364 and be perfect, and then 2 months from now, then the new score is 425. So again, this way to continuously do it. And I think they recommend you going into it every 1 week or every 2 weeks or something. So, but a very short duration, you have to continuously evaluate it. Again, remember what I said, security is about continuous process, not a one-time thing. So again, securescore.office.com, short address, you can go to it, or you can go through the Compliance Center. Something new that, now this is actually pretty exciting when we saw it. So this is the current address to get to it. I imagine it'll change or something, but maybe this is the main one. But this is, it's still in preview. It is usable. They have some little quirks in it, but it's definitely worth taking a look at. So if you are in a compliant environment, or you will provide services to customers who are in a compliant environment, this is going to be particularly important to you. Now, it is something that impacts Azure. It is something that impacts Office 365. So this is, in this particular one, this is Office 365 GDPR. And in here, you'll see, so in this example, if you look where it says Microsoft Managed Controls, you hit the drop down there, you're going to see all these controls that Microsoft says, hey, for this one, for this regulation, here's the things that we provide, third-party tested and dates. So that's your proof from them. But then they have all these other ones for that regulation that you're supposed to go do. And so you can assign it to somebody. You can click Manage Documents because, you know, part of this you need to say how you do it. You know, not every single step, but, you know, the high-level steps of what you accomplish or what you do to accomplish it. And then you can store it in there. You can say, we did it on this date, and you can have a third party say, yes, we tested it, it passed, and here's the date, or it's not compliant or not implemented. You know, whatever the state is for that thing, you can have. So it gives you kind of a nice roll-up. And because this covers both Azure and Office 365, it gives you good coverage. So, you know, as we're talking about Office 365, I thought this was important to at least make you aware, and because, again, compliance is normally its own beast. Compliance and security are not the same things, but they're typically very related. Okay, so, you know, one fundamental thing, I believe I talked about this a little earlier, but, you know, in a little bit greater length, Microsoft Enterprise Mobility plus Security, we find to be a really compelling offering for all those customers in Office 365. You know, I'll be truthful with you that 2 years ago, I would struggle to make that statement. And, you know, they pulled together a number of technologies together, but, you know, they really didn't orchestrate well. Some things just didn't work. They were hard to manage. Rolling out to devices was a little clunky. I'll say they've solved 90, maybe even 95% of all those concerns that we've had with it. So now it is a really good product and set of services. So one of the reasons I call that out is if you looked at it a year ago, if you looked at it 2 years ago, now's the time to have an open mind about it, especially if you haven't adopted anything else or your contracts are coming up. I would say it's time to reevaluate it for two reasons. Because the product's gotten better and we can help in your implementation of this. Because, again, it's not about implementing one thing. It's about constantly implementing, constantly updating, constantly evaluating, because that's the only way to really make all these things work. The nice thing is that, you know, whether it's for mobile devices, so you have iOS, whether it's for Android, or it's even your Windows applications themselves, or Windows desktops themselves, that you want to have a clear set of policies of how you would manage things. You want to set a kind of a global set of rules of how you want to do, like, threat analytics, you know, where you want to know if somebody's trying to gain access to your services, not just the onesie twosies, like, oh, I do this one thing for mobile phones, I do this other thing for workstations. You kind of want to have a combined role of view, because you're responsible for the organization, not the pieces. So you need something that collects all of that for you and starts to roll it up. And so EMS has done a great job at being able to provide those set of services to prevent issues from happening, and then actually get information back to the senior part of your IT team to really provide a direction of where issues are happening, so that we can make the proper adjustments, either because we're currently under attack, or we see that there's threats for one, or we see that people are, you know, we're getting alerts that maybe some people are misbehaving, contractors or some of our staff, and we need to handle it accordingly. So the nice thing is that it's giving you all this information, and it's built, no surprise, you know, to bolt on extremely well with Office 365. So when we break down some of the core pieces inside of EMS, you know, there's identity access and management. So there's normally we think of things like Active Directory, threat protection, and analyzing, or just being a wall in the beginning to thwart off those attacks. Information protection. So for those of you who are a little bit long in the tooth like myself, and you know, we think about digital rights management or rights management. Now it really is information protection, right? So this is kind of that new place for it in managing the information itself. It's actually one of the subjects I think is one of the most compelling out of all of them, oddly enough. And then there's security management, and really gaining that visibility across your whole kind of IT environment of where things are and being able to manage them accordingly. So the one place, actually, I'll talk about this scenario here in a moment as it relates to information protection. But these are the core elements, if you will. And this list here is almost out of date. There's even more things under here that's being added on, you know, last week, yesterday. I feel like I'm constantly adding to this thing. So as of this morning, it could be out of date. So there's a lot of good elements. taking a step back from just EMS and what it provides for desktop or for devices and workstations and your services, when you think about, hey, I need to have a good security architecture. I need to make sure that I have a holistic view of what I do for my environment from a security and management perspective. Welcome to the future of your security mind. When you look at this at first, it is overwhelming. I almost think, and I apologize if anybody got a seizure just looking at this thing, because there's a lot of stuff happening. It feels like it's not statically moving, but it feels like it's blinking, because there's just so much going on. But if you were to zoom in on just one particular area, right? So if I were to just, let's see if I can even make this thing happen. If I were to zoom in on one area, information protection management, this stuff makes sense. We have to label things, classify them, define our rules, how we're going to encrypt it, manage the documents, do the proper reporting. You know, those things get applied, you know, via Intune as well with mobile device management, mobile application management. You know, if we start following along, the story starts to sound reasonable. But we have to do that everywhere. So, you know, just learning what the capability is, but understanding how it applies to everything else in the environment is tricky. This is the part where everything was on-prem or everything was in the cloud, or like most of the world, it's a mixture of both. There's a lot to go through. So that's why defining scenarios, that's why prioritizing those scenarios and attacking those are really critical to make sure that you have good, complete coverage in the areas that are the most important to the business. You can still apply things organization global-wide, but if you just do that one by one with all your security capabilities, you're going to not fully put on the layers of an onion that you need to fully protect and manage your devices that you have out there. So again, looking at this, it looks quite daunting. The great news is most of these things now are meant to work with one another. Again, this is kind of a really, you know, great time to be around this environment. I worked at Microsoft starting in 1999, and way back then, we couldn't have dreamed all this stuff would be integrated. This right here would be 50, 60 servers. Regardless, you only had 5 people in your email, you know, because everything had to have its own server. Everything has to be done different, and you had to probably get about 30 different vendors just to get something close to this, and it still wasn't ideal. So the fact is that, yes, you do have to think about all this. You do need to orchestrate all this. The great thing is I just have to define it and put the policies and configuration and watch for it. I don't have to actually install it and be, you know, the world's, you know, one of the world leading expert on cryptography to do this any longer. So anyway, I thought that was important to kind of share. So again, once you look at that map, what we typically do here, so our managed services is called AgileCover, and this is something that we use ourselves, right? That there's these 4 pieces of the pie. So if you want to take this and use it as a model, you know, please be our guest. We'd love to work with you on helping you figure all this out. But if you look at the 4 pieces of the pie, there's infrastructure and services. Kind of blend those 2 things together, because you are going to do some things as services in the cloud. There's some things that are going to be infrastructure, you know, whether you put them as on-prem servers, on-prem VM, in the cloud VMs, you know, services in the cloud. They all still have to have that same level of attention to detail. You know, are we still doing good, you know, practices, good hygiene, no matter where they're deployed, and have some consistency across all those environments. But there's also the users. There's their devices and the content. So when you look at one at a time, each pie, you can say, yes, I need to protect my users to make sure that they're trained properly, that they have access to the information, that you know, the way that they access things is clear. So I need to manage them individually. But devices too, you know, what are the right things I'm doing with devices? So if they're lost, somebody tries to hack into them, am I aware that they try to get hacked into? Can I control that? But then all the pieces work together, because there is a user who uses a device that accesses a service that gets access to content. So in that small scenario, they could be remote, they could be local. I'll talk about both of those scenarios here in a moment. What experience are they going to have? How do we make sure that they can access the things that they need to access to feel productive without going through hoops or going through what we think are stupid things just to do their daily job? so they can still feel very productive, but the business can say, yes, they're very productive, but they cannot do naughty things with our content. Their devices are protected, we know who they are, and the service is being well managed. That's the conversation that we want to have as an IT organization. So chapter 4, let's talk about some very specific scenarios. So, there's just 2 scenarios I'm going to go through. I think you can take this same type of approach, if you will, copy paste it to lots of other things. This is just, one way of viewing it. But we think about remote users. And with these remote users, let's say, we are a company who we have a large staff that's out in the field, whether they're salespeople, they are technicians, or engineers, and they are remote. Okay, and I want to make sure that when they are remote, that I don't have any kind of accidental data leakage where they put something on a thumb drive and just forgot it someplace, or when they're at Starbucks that they can get hacked. And and everybody's trying at Starbucks to really pound into you. And so how do I protect them? Because when they get attacked like that, they're not able to be productive. They're not a happy employee. They're not delivering great value to our customers and our partners, and that's important. So that's why I'm doing it, not just because it's inconvenient, right? We do it for those reasons. So one of the things is if we look at the bottom again, these are some of the components that we talked about EMS earlier on. So if you look at the scenarios of what it is, it starts to give us a guide of what are the things we would use to then support that scenario, to make sure that when they log on, we're using Azure Active Directory, so they're synced up, and that's what enables the policies to flow down accordingly. So they log in with their Azure Active Directory identity, which is the same as their Office 365 identity. So now they log in, and certain policies are there, and the service, Intune, other areas of EMS that go, hey, they're remote. So if they're remote, you know what? I want them to have multi-factor authentication, and I think that they should only access these things. And we're going to make sure that the content that's applied onto that device is also, policy we've set. And in this scenario, we're going to use information protection to make sure that the documents that they acquire are protected, even if somebody does hack into it. So one thing I'll stop here for a minute and talk about Intune or information protection. It's a favorite topic of mine because there's a difference between access and rights. So let's say you say, well, I have a SharePoint site in Office 365 today, and users can put documents into it. They can take out documents out of it because I've given them access. So you can have, let's say, a contractor who is non-malicious, doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They access the document, they're going to work on it remotely, they took a copy of it, they put it on, on their computer, and they've left. Now, I may or may not have any policies on that on that computer. It's a different story. But, they now have this content sitting on their computer. They're traveling around. Somebody, takes their computer maliciously or not, let's just say it was maliciously, takes their computer, finds that bit of content, right? They find it there. They can, remember, this contractor didn't follow our rules. They don't have BitLocker ensuring that their hard drive is encrypted, so somebody just mounted it, found that file that said customer data. Oh, that's a cool file name, customer data dot, XSLX or whatever it is for Excel, and they have it, and they open it up. Oh, that's nice, right? But if we were protecting that document, when I pulled it out of SharePoint that had information protection turned on, that had a policy that says that they get that content can only be pulled offline and used someplace else for, let's say, 30 days, but still requires somebody to authenticate in order to open it, because this content was for, let's say, Diana, and Diana was the one who had rights. So when this person got the document from that computer that wasn't encrypted, that hacker then plugged it in, tried to open the document says, hey man, I'm encrypted and I'm protected. I have to go ask the service if you're able to open it. And the service is going to say, great, who are you? Give us a username and password. You don't have any? Well, then the document's not going to open. You can try to do whatever you do to open it up, but it's just going to be a big hot mess of encrypted data. So that's the thing where you're protecting the document no matter where it goes. So if somebody had access, like they're supposed to, they have the content, but the content with information protection keeps it protected no matter where it goes. So those are the types of policies that you can enforce throughout your business to make sure that, you know, it's protected. Again, that's protecting the content, whether it was maliciously done or through, you know, somebody that wasn't being malicious, but somebody else was. So again, taking a look at those scenarios. Now, how are you supposed to know all these things are supposed to do that? Well, you can spend lots of time researching it, viewing all the videos, and trying to configure yourself. But it's also a place where partners like us, this is what we do. You work with us, and we help you go through that. But nobody knows your business and your scenarios better than you. So that's why we love to work together in helping define those sorts of things. All right, another scenario, second one, is on-site users. So now we have this staff. So we have these remote users that are out doing these things. We've protected them. We've made sure that when they're on the road, we protect that content. But there's other staff. Let's say there's internal training staff, or let's say they were, I don't know, you know, on-site people that really don't need access to content outside of the office. Could be seasonal workers, could be contractors for things that are on-site. But when they're on-site, I want them to access all the things that they're supposed to access, you know, with the proper settings. But when they leave the house, when they leave the office, no reason they should have access to that. Okay, so that's essentially a different scenario. We might use many of the same things. Some things just don't apply to them. Right? So when they're in the house, when they're in the office, I don't really need them doing multi-factor authentication. I'm okay. Our policy says, and you can say you want it or not, but let's just say in this example, they don't need it. We said we don't want to do it. We just, you know, they come in, put username, password, it's good enough. But when they try and do that outside, it doesn't work. No access. So that's kind of a nice scenario, right? And I can still say, well, you know, when they are here in the office and they do get access to the materials, I still want to protect that content so that if they try to take that content away, go home with it, that they still can't access what they're not supposed to access. So I still want to block those sorts of scenarios. Now, in that case, things are different, right? On-site, yes. Off-site, no. Remote user, on and off-site, yes. So that's why we're talking about different layers of policies, but you can't just do it all at once. You have to kind of take scenario by scenario, I feel, that to be good. But let's say in the same scenario you say, well, you know, that's true. I don't want them accessing all that stuff outside, and I certainly don't want them installing Office, and I certainly don't want them going with their mobile phones accessing it. You know, I'm just painting one potential scenario. But, and if you look at the bottom left-hand corner here, you know, with the fancy red, maybe in an expanded scenario, maybe I do want them to be able to access their Outlook web access. So I want them to access their email via website, Office 365, externally, and I want to do it via multi-factor. So again, you're kind of layering it on because this fits what you need for your business. Okay, so again, looking at the scenarios you want to do starts to pan out what feature set you want to do. Now, there's lots of information on the internet, and a lot of information we even have in our own blogs that talk even deeper around each one of these features. Again, I don't want this to be a huge feature sell of the product themselves, but really thinking about the scenarios of how you'd want to use it. These are things that we work with our customer. And you know, not to be rude, but I'll say, you know, talk to me less about what you want implemented. Talk to me more about the scenarios you want to focus on and solve, and then we'll focus there. So, you know, kind of the last chapter here really is, you know, thinking about a strategic partner to work with. So at Agile IT, that's our view. So you can tell, hopefully, through this that we want to know about your business processes. We want to understand your policies. We want to understand how your people work, so that way we can give you the right recommendation to work together. Because we're just not a place that's just, you know, where we just want to do user password changes all the time. Azure Active Directory Premium solves a lot of that anyway. You know, that's not the interesting stuff and not the most valuable part to your business. So we really want to be in line with one another. We do things that are like quarterly briefings. We send out monthly newsletters. We have, you know, for our partners or customers that buy subscriptions through us, they're able to meet with us every Thursday. We have a Tech Talk engineering time for them. Just part of what you could do. Just drop in and say, hey, I got some questions. Not even a ticket. You can just go that way. But again, we do provide the ongoing maintenance and monitoring and management of workstations and servers in the cloud or on the prem. as well. So we try to provide a very kind of comprehensive view of services to our customers, but really this is what we want to solve for our customers, is looking at these 4 pieces of the pie, understanding the pieces, and helping them resolve scenarios for security and compliance for their business. Now, one of the ways that we do this is that we take those licenses that either you already purchased, or we help you figure out what's the right ones, and we implement these as a service. So we'll onboard you with these services, or we do all the deployment configuration, we work with you, and then we're there with you every single month to make sure that things continue to be protected, managed, updated. We make you aware of things. We talk about how you'd want to engage with us, ongoing. So we really see a lot of customers going to Silver already, seeing that that's a good fit for them, and then leaving some room for later on where they may want to transition to Gold because it's important for their business, or it's just that right time to take that next step. We apply the same thing for identity. So when we talk about identities, some people say, well, hey, that's kind of weird, you have mobile devices there, but mobile devices are kind of an identity as well, and we kind of have to map those accordingly. But it also marries up, oddly enough, between the E3 and the E5 license for EMS, and subsequently as it comes out with Microsoft 365 E3 and E5. And even here, there's new things coming out for Microsoft, so we're just going to be adding new capabilities into the services as we work with our customers and with Microsoft about that. Okay, so I talked about a lot of different things, and hopefully you kind of get the point that I'm making about telling the story around what we want to do with security, understanding your scenarios, and then really start to get your arms around, what are the right pieces to implement solving those scenarios for customers, because locking them out and making them non-productive is a no-go. But we also can't have them doing everything under the sake of their productivity and impacting the business, because not only is it information that gets lost, sometimes it's content. You could have had a staff of 5 people, multiple reviews, worked on it for months, got people to review it, and then that content just goes away. And you're not able to protect it, or somebody overwrote it, or somebody hijacked it, and the investment into that content is also lost. And sometimes recreating it's tough. So that goes a little bit to good hygiene, backups or restore, those sorts of things. Then the second part is really defining your scenarios, right? Define your scenarios that you're going to tackle from a security perspective. Again, you can still implement some things that are broad, but you get some big wins when like, hey, remote users, we feel like we are really, really doing the things that we can to protect the content, to protect the user, to protect the device, and protect our services and the business, that scenario. And then just start, sometimes the things you do for one helps, already 30% for the next one and 30% after that. And then, again, continuously check your scores. Go to Secure Scores, go to the Secure Score for Office 365, check it, see where you are, and start putting together a plan to improve those. That's actually one of the part of the services that we provide in the suites that I talked about earlier, where we are checking those every week to 2 weeks, and then telling you like, hey, here's a plan, what we want to do next, and we work with you, you say yes, and then we keep it going. So this way you don't have to be so focused on it every day. So because we have our own economies of scale, can do it for a number of customers, we can include you as well. If you have any questions about this deck or any other questions around security, feel free to send me an email. I'm Conrad Agramont, CEO here at Agile IT, conrad.a@agilet.com. Shoot me an email. We'll set up a time to talk, and I look forward to hearing from you guys in the future. I love hearing new stories and what seems sometimes is weird security stories like, hey, how would you do this? Sometimes we don't know the answer, and we have to do a little bit of research. But we're a big partner of Microsoft, a Gold partner with I think over 16 competencies. We've been doing it for over 10 years in terms of focus on Office 365 and security services, and do a lot of work in Azure, which is a whole other topic all by itself. So thanks for taking the time. Looking forward to your questions. I'll pause here now and see if there has been any questions submitted on. If you don't have any right now, again, shoot me an email and we can take it from there. So let's check and take a look. Doesn't look like we have any questions, so that's great. Either I did a great job or a terrible job. I'll just err on the side that I did a great job. Thank you so much for your time. We will make this available. We'll send you a link to the deck so you can use it in whatever way that you want. Shoot me an email. Thanks again. Hopefully you come for the next webinar that we have. Thank you very much. Have a great day.